Come on in. We'll call the workshop to order. This is a workshop to allow FDEP to present the Basin Management Action Plan, BMAP program.
Well, I didn't need an $80 line, but I needed $740.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. This workshop is in regards to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection's Upper Wakulla River and Wakulla Springs Basin Management Plan. A previous meeting that we had, commissioners, we had discussed, there was quite a bit of debate about the BMAP, what it was, what it wasn't. There were plenty of questions, so we asked Mr. Thomas Frick with DEP to come and give us a presentation, because he has lived, breathed, and eat the BMAP. And so anyway, he is here to give a presentation to you guys on the BMAP, what it is and what it isn't, answer your questions on the BMAP. So at this point in time, Thomas, welcome and thank you.
Thanks, David.
Welcome, sir. If you don't mind, if you'll give us your name, and so the folks at home can hear as well. They'll be watching.
Will do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, my name is Tom Frick. I'm the Director for the Assessment and Restoration Division at DEP. So within my purview is working on restoration activities, including total maximum daily loads, which you probably have heard about, TMDLs, and then Basin Management Action Plans, or BMAPs, which I'll present a little bit about here in a few moments. And just to keep you all on your toes, I've reordered the slides just a little bit. So if you looked on it, if you're following in your packet, we're going to have a couple slides that have been moved a little bit, but it's not too many of them. But I just want to make sure everybody kind of understands the context of what we're doing, not just at DEP, but fortunately talking about what the state is doing with restoration of these springs. Our spring systems, have been being enriched with nitrogen, or nitrates specifically, for a couple decades now. So this is not a new phenomenon, but we've seen actual biological and problems in our springs. And you can see on here, this is Weeki Wachee Springs. If you remember Wakulla Springs, probably about 15, 20 years ago, I know when I was out in the field going to Wakulla Springs and doing sampling actually in the spring itself, we had a lot of algae, and that was covering up all the eelgrass. And so these nitrates that get in the springs actually do have a response in our springs that reduces the recreational value of those springs and also the ecological value of the spring. So it's an important thing that we're looking at. We're not just looking at a specific number that's out there, but we're really looking at something that's happening and occurring to our spring systems, which we want to turn them back to the way they were when we were all growing up and know those spring systems. This is the world that I live in, as David mentioned, our restoration world, where basically we look at identifying water quality standards. So as I mentioned, the department has adopted a springs criterion for nitrates. We're one of the only states in the United States that has that. We adopted that a number of years ago, and again, it was tied to that biological response. This isn't just a theoretical number out there. This is something that we actually do see imbalances when that occurs. And so what the department has to do is we have to go out, identify, sample, collect data on these systems, which we've been doing for about a couple decades, specifically for Wakulla Springs, and look at those systems and assess whether we're meeting those water quality standards or not. And if we're not, we have to go through our restoration program. Really, where the rubber meets the road on the restoration program is the BMAPs, the Basin Management Action Plans, because those are the actions that we collectively, locally, stakeholders, along with the state water management district, need to put in place in order to restore our spring systems. So to kind of give you an idea of how that is, it's all laid out in the law itself. We have the Watershed Restoration Act, which came in 1999. So we've been doing these restoration activities since then. And it's been amended a couple times, 2006 and 2016, and I'll talk a little bit more about the 2016 amendment. But there's a few tenets on what we have to do. One, it's got to be good science. We have to have public participation, which is public meetings and going out and meeting with local stakeholders. And then we have to equitably allocate, which basically means that the law says that we have to look at various sources, and then we have to ask for reductions from those sources. We can't just say, oh, well, this is coming from something like septic tanks or septic systems, and say, well, we're not going to touch those. We're actually going to do something with wastewater treatment plants, or we're going to do something with agricultural producers, or with homeowners from fertilizer. We have to look at the sources, and we have to deal with those sources as they're going into the system. So that's how BMAPs were set up. In 2016, the Florida Aquifer and Springs and Aquifer Protection Act came into place. And that added a few things to what the department has to do and how it has to do it. Most importantly, what it did is it put some timetables. It told the department, DEP, and also the water management districts, it said, we have these 30 outstanding Florida springs that are throughout the state. And here's a picture where they all are. You're familiar. I don't think this has this doesn't have a pointer on it. Okay. But you can see Wakulla Springs up there, number 23 on the map. But there's 30 of these systems. 24 of them did not meet water quality standards, including Wakulla Springs. So 24 out of these 30, we had to do a restoration plan. And the law in 2016 said you need to go out, DEP, you need to collect the data to determine whether those 30 systems are meeting water quality standards or not. And then if they're not, so the 24 that weren't, you have to develop restoration plans to deal with all those sources. And it went into a little bit more specificity about those, but it's been a quick time. They gave us 2 years basically to develop those plans. So the BMAPs, they said once you start developing the BMAPs, you need to have those adopted within a 2-year time period, which July 1, 2016, that was July 1, 2018. So that was the deadline and the effort that the department was tasked with. Water management districts were also looking at these same systems, and they had to develop minimum flows and levels on those. So it wasn't just all looking at water quality, they were also looking at water quantity as part of this. And I know Wakulla Springs, as part of the Northwest Florida's water management districts, is developing an MFL on that. So what does the Act say for DEP, and getting into a little bit more specificity? It required us to identify what's known as a priority focus area. And these priority focus areas are the areas that our aquifer is most vulnerable. Okay, so when you think about this, think of areas that don't have any clay underneath or anything to impede water that happens on the surface or just below the surface from getting to the aquifer and then coming out our spring systems. It also made us look at soil conditions. So obviously where there's sandy soils that really don't do anything to hold up any of the nutrients, specifically nitrogen, from getting down into our aquifer, those are more vulnerable. So we had to use these things, including travel time, proximity to the spring, to identify these priority focus areas. And these priority focus areas were really important as it comes to the prohibitions that are in state law. The department also had to do a nitrogen source inventory. So again, when I was talking about equitably allocating, so the law told us that we had to look at sports turf. We had to look at wastewater plants. We had to look at agricultural fertilizer. We had to look at urban fertilizer. We also had to look at the contribution from septic systems. That was identified specifically in the law, and that's what we did in our inventory. And I'll show you a picture of this here in a moment. It also said that in any of our spring sheds where we have septic systems greater than 20% of the contribution, then we have to do a remediation plan. We were required by law to do a remediation plan for those systems. And you can already guess, and you already know, that Wakulla Springs was one of the ones that septic systems were greater than a 20% contribution to the loading that's actually getting into our groundwater and coming out of our springs.
That's in the entire basin, not just Wakulla County, right? I mean,
That's correct.
How
Yes,
many
sir.
of the other springs exceeded the 20%?
We had, I believe it was a total of 17 that required the required remediation plan. Is that correct, Moida? Yeah, I believe it was 17 out of those.
Out of that, that number that you said on the basin, what percentage is Wakulla contributing to the nitrogen of Wakulla Springs?
Let me get to that slide here in a second, and then I'll have to ask Moida with the details. So she has it; she can kind of look that up. But so also tied to those priority focus areas. So this is those vulnerable areas. Were these prohibitions that are explicitly stated in the law? Okay, this is not something DEP put together. Obviously, we put it in the BMAP, but this is what the law, the statutes say. Most importantly, I think, to today's discussion and to a lot of folks, is this idea that new septic systems on lots smaller than 1 acre, you cannot put a conventional system on those. Okay, you either have to hook up to a gravity sewer line that's going to take it somewhere to be treated, or you're going to have advanced denitrification or advanced treatment of those septic systems. And so that was a prohibition dealing with future growth in the PFAs and in the springs, and it was actually written into the statute. So to get to your question, Commissioner, so on the right-hand side, you can see the map. The dotted line on the outside is the entire springs contributing area, or spring shed as the law identified it. So this is going all the way up into Georgia. Gadsden, Leon, and a little bit of Jefferson County are included in this. The darker areas, there's 2 of them. There's a priority focus area 1 and a priority focus area 2. But basically those 2 areas, the darker areas, are the priority focus areas. The majority of that is in Wakulla County, with some in Leon County, obviously below the Cody Scarp in southern Leon County. On the left-hand side is the source inventory that we put together, and
yeah,
Moida.
here in the basin,
Go ahead.
That one is for the entire basin.
the whole basin.
The whole basin,
I
that's
think
correct.
Jerry's question was, you said, when
What's the contribution
when it
from?
kicked over, 20% has to be the number where you need the remediation plan, right?
Yes, sir.
And out of that, and that's in the whole basin, right?
Yes.
Obviously, there's a lot more septic tanks in Clark Estates than there is in Wakulla County, so we didn't contribute to that whole 20%.
What part of the 20%?
The septic systems are 34% that are going to this, and I don't know if we have that divided out.
But that's only Wakulla County, that's not the whole basin, right?
That 34%
The whole basin.
represented there is for the whole basin.
Right.
46% of, if we look at just the priority focus area, so priority focus area 1 and 2, 46% of contribution is from septic systems. Now, we've not broken it up by county because the way the statute reads, it has to be the priority focus area. So we've not broken it down by how much of that contribution is from septic.
I understand,
tanks
but
from
just to
Leon
explain it to
Right.
people, of that 20%, we may only be contributing 10% of that 20, or whatever, 20, whatever it is. I don't know.
Actually,
So in the darker area, the smaller the priority focus area, 46%, right? I heard Moida
46.
is coming from septic systems, and
Those-
correct.
All those may be in Woodville or, south of the Cody Scarp or whatever you're saying.
Correct. And how many, you have the table with the number of septic systems?
Right, so in the priority focus area, and combined, we've got almost 12,000 tanks, so 11.
Right. How many of those were in Wakulla County?
Both priority focus or just one?
That's both, in both of them, correct. I don't have it broken down by county, but if you.
I understand it's irrelevant, but we just,
it's about 50-50.
Do you have
Joe
that?
knows. He needs to work for you guys.
So that's so that kicked us into the statutory requirement was to do a remediation plan for the Wakulla Basin. And okay. So we needed to do a remediation plan. As Mortis said, there's about 12,000 systems that are in those priority focus areas that need to be remediated to deal with it. Really, not all septic systems are bad. You know, there's a few things to look at. The contribution to the groundwater and the vulnerability of the soils and that aquifer below it is really the highlight there and the most important. Also looking at proximity to the spring itself, and then also with the density of those systems is also an important consideration to deal with.
Yes, another question. I understand the statute's pretty clear that if you're less than an acre, then you got to have a performance-based or not, whatever. But the remediation part you keep talking about, is that where you're making people not be able to do repairs, not being able to do modifications, and they have to...
Go ahead. Yes, sir. Go ahead with your question. I'm sorry.
The remediation component is the repairs, modifications, and retrofits.
Correct.
And
yes,
and
sir.
The statutory part is easy, basically. It's just if you got less than an acre, you got to have it.
Correct.
And that less
So
than
that-
acre is only in the PFA, right? Not countywide, just in the PFA.
That's correct. So for new systems, right. So the OSTDS plan, so this is what our remediation plan says, or that septic system plan. The first bullet is dealing with new systems, and that's exactly as the commissioner mentioned, is the prohibition that's in statute. Okay, so that's inside the PFA, lots of less than 1 acre. All right, that's what's in there. So the second component is remediation of existing systems. All right, now the first part, the new systems, that kicks in as soon as the BMAPs are in place. Okay, that will occur, as soon as those become effective. And like I said, that's mainly dealing with new growth. The second part of it, the existing systems, remediation of those systems, we have identified a few things that need to be done before that becomes a requirement, no later than 5 years from the date the BMAPs are in place. That's what the statute allowed us to do. And basically, there's a few components to that. The most important is the wastewater plan. What we heard from a lot of folks is we need to know whether our neighborhood is actually going to be put on sewer, or do we need to go to one of these fancy systems. There was a lot of information gaps that homeowners needed to know for moving forward. So one of the things that the department is doing is we're partnering with the counties, Wakulla County being one of them, and we are paying 100% of doing a feasibility analysis to say, all right, this is what you need to do in the next 20 years to remediate septic systems. What do you all have planned? And so we're paying for that engineering and going to help, because that will educate both the department but also the homeowners, so they know what's going on and what will happen in their neighborhood.
Having said that, is it possible that the remedial component of this rule would go away? Let's say in 5 years from now, we're down below 20% contributions from septic systems. Will you just say, all right, we're done with that, now we're just going to focus on new development? Or is this it?
We will have the remediation plan in place. Now, at that point, I'll kind of get to your question. The threshold isn't a contribution of 20%. The threshold that we're looking at is meeting the water quality criterion, or the TMDL. So that's a lower, a concentration that's coming out of the spring. It's a different number than the actual contribution from septic systems.
I guess my question
And there's some good news on that front.
If there was a separate basin, different spring, forget about Wakulla Springs, and their contribution was 18% from septic tanks, then they wouldn't have a remediation plan, right?
No, sir. The law allowed us, the department, it said you have to do it with 20%, and then we were allowed to make a determination if it was below 20%.
Even if we fall below 20%, say we get down to 15%, we don't get kicked out of that remediation plan.
Correct. That is correct.
TMDL?
It's right. It's to meeting the TMDL, and that's on a long-term basis, the TMDL.
is 140,000 pounds of nitrogen taken out.
Right, but the target's going to be the concentration, the .35 concentration.
Rain-
Right now,
Right.
right now, that's rated as 140,000 pounds, is that?
That's been our calculation. I assume that's
Yeah.
the,
Your direction was 20%. That's where you got to do something on that.
we were required to do a remediation plan for septic systems if it was above 20%.
My information that I picked up from someone who knew, who was a scientist, whatever, said that Wakulla was only contributing 6% to the nitrogen to Wakulla Springs. Now, I keep asking a question and I can't find anybody who can tell me that we are or we're not, other than that source that I had. Somebody, it would be really nice if somebody could tell me what percentage of nitrogen is Wakulla contributing.
We can
And
go
I-
back and we can get that information to
Right.
you.
I'd like
Already
to,
had that today, Jerry. You have, 35% coming from septic tanks. In the priority focus area provides 46% up, so 17% estimated would be, the amount coming from just the priority focus area would be 17% of the total nitrogen. The problem is, what we have to do is we have to make sure we reduce the amount of nitrogen entering the system by 140,000 pounds. And how do we get there? That's what this is about.
I understand that. Well, I'm just putting out the information. You're not going to get the 140,000 pounds out of 6%.
Now, you said you're
We'll
not
get
looking
you
at
there.
140,000 pounds, you're looking at milligrams per liter in the water, right? At this point.
That's the ultimate goal. That 140,000 pounds translate to the .35. But the ultimate goal is to be able to be below that number on a long-term basis, so we can get the ecology back where we're not having the algal growth and you can get the fish populations.
Just vote to increase rainfall and problem solved.
Yeah, we could,
We're
maybe,
getting
but I
this
don't
year.
think it would work too well.
That'd work, right?
So a couple things more things to mention on the remediation side. As I mentioned, that's not going to kick in immediately once these BMAPs. We have to do that feasibility. We're going to be working with you all to get that in place.
Do you have a time frame on the feasibility study when you think it may be complete?
We haven't talked with the county yet specifically on that. Obviously, the sooner the better. It's to do it right and to have the public input and making sure everybody understands what it is we're doing. It's going to take 2-3 years. Just talking with other counties and other consultants who have done this type of work in areas. So we can do that ahead of the 5 years, but it will take some effort and take some time. It's not going to be done by January.
And that feasibility only applies to the remediation, not the implementation of the new system portion of it? Is that
That's
right?
correct. It's for the remediation. Now, the good news for you all is you can do that for county-wide, though most of the county is in, our BMAP area. But we're not trying to parse out areas that are outside the county or outside our BMAP area, but inside the county. We just said, hey, we're going to help you do this. It'll inform us, and it'll inform you all. So.
And we're going to be a little ahead of other folks, and so ours should move fairly quick. We've got a pretty good idea on sewering and
Well, the good thing about-
working with the district on that, so
The-
it shouldn't be a complicated.
The good thing about us is we sort of lucked out with BP money in that we're going to have all our sewer improvements, running new sewers in the area where these homeowners. I guess the question I would have is that the people who have to, in the 5-year period, their septic goes out, and they're poor people, we'll say. They hadn't got money to put in a new system. You gotta, in your system, somehow you gotta accommodate for those people that you're not asking them to. By legislation, you're making them go onto a new system. So somehow you have to accommodate for the expense of that.
Yes, sir. So that's basically my next slide. But before we jump on that, I just want to make sure that we've identified. So the remediation plan that we're talking about, so when it does kick in, that will be for all septic tanks inside the priority focus areas, regardless of lot size.
Theoretically, let's say that when you get the plan back from David and you get the plan back from Leon County, and it says we're going to remove X amount of tanks, and that equals Chuck's magic number, or close to it. Is that, we'll still have to do the remediation, all right? We stuck on
Correct,
that,
yes.
No matter what.
You'll have to go through that remediation, yes, sir.
Because that's the real, I don't want to stray too far off the farm, but the real heartburn, and I'm an engineer, so I do 90% of the performance-based tanks in this county. Hard part is exactly what Jerry said. I agree with Jerry on everything, but there's going to be a lot of midnight repairs because people just can't afford it.
Right. So I'll skip past this. This just basically says funding is the key. So Commissioner, this is your point and your point as well, sir. The key to this is really going to be with funding. So right now, it will be starting September 15th. We have to get through basically the legislature has to release the money to us. But we're already going to start a septic incentive program that will pay, and this is in Wakulla County, inside the priority focus areas, we will pay for up to $10,000 to incentivize people to go to those higher performing systems next month.
Even if they do not need it necessarily, they don't have a repair, they just want
Even if they don't need
to
it.
get ahead of it.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'll be
So,
flat
Mr.
honest with you, the whole key to this thing is these passive drain fields.
Yes, sir.
Because the only option people have now is a fast unit or something like that, is performance-based. You gotta have an operating permit, and you gotta have a maintenance contract. That's the real grief, is.
Right.
And I even talked to the guys at the Department of Health, they figure about 6 years is when if you have a performance-based system, I built houses for people, they had to put them in, Marshall Spears is a good example. In 6 years, you'll get your money back if you go dig that thing up and put a regular septic tank in, just because of the power bill and the maintenance bill. So to me, the key thing to this, and I know it's not a panacea for lack of a better word, but these passive drain field, there's no specifications on it. There's no, here's how, if you build it, you're deemed to comply. And I know you can't apply them everywhere.
Right.
But there are a lot of situations where they would be useful. As long as there's air blowing through it, you got to have an operating permit, be it aerobic or be it a performance-based or whatever. That to me is the real issue, is the ongoing cost. Even if you subsidize the construction, that homeowner on fixed income still got to pay $200 or $300 a year.
So, yes, sir. So the passive systems, the rule to allow those is now in place. It was effective July 31st.
But it didn't tell you how to do it.
It just describes that now there are different groups out there who have installed the systems.
Spoke to the
the
woman
on-site,
that's the head of the on-site.
Roxanne, yes.
And we had a long talk about them. They did a couple of
Right.
trial runs, and she's the one that said this isn't going to be the answer. Everybody thinks it is, but if we just at least know what percentage of wood chips to sand and how thick it had to be and what permeability, at least somebody could get started on something.
Right.
Basically,
And then,
and the same thing on that active system. The people that I talk to, as soon as the inspector leaves the property, they unplug it because it's costing them $30 a month.
right.
So
For the,
somehow someone's got to look at that and say, basically, this system isn't working. Let's do something that everybody likes and everybody will. They might not all like it, but it's something that, because if you leave it up to the customer, he will save the dollar as soon as you get outside. And also, if you have an inspection, you want to get away from an annual plumber inspection of your systems. People can't bear that expense because who controls that expense? And I know areas where that we have to have annual inspections on this or that and the other, and the first thing you know, those annuals are just eating into your budget.
Well, the state law from the Department of Health says if it's performance-based and it's permitted, you've got to have an annual operating permit, and you've got to have a maintenance contract. Now, you can do the maintenance as a homeowner, but not many people are going to do that. And they have no jurisdiction over that whatsoever.
yeah. But to your point, Commissioner, the passive systems do not require an operating permit, and they do not require the electricity. Now, DOH has updated their rule to allow passive systems. There are other passive systems I know that they're working on, so they will be updating their rule over the next couple of years to give more options that are out there.
Jason is the head guy at our Department of Health over environmental health.
So basically,
They don't have any.
this system here is tomorrow my friend's septic tank goes out. So when you get this in place, he can apply for a $10,000 grant to replace that.
After
Yeah.
middle of next month,
Wow.
yes.
Sometime in the next 5 years.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, but you
Yep.
know, it's not neat, because you gotta pay every year from the rest of your life for a maintenance.
Not-
but this is the
but if
be-
you
this
can
is
put
the
in the
best we've
passive
done.
system.
Unless you
Yeah.
put in the passive.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, I don't,
So there's options out there, but yes, there are some
Every year
instances.
for the rest of your life for your sewage treatment. So it's just like having a sewer
No, that's not just
sewer
like that,
system.
because my septic tank, my house doesn't use power, for example, and I don't have to have an operating permit.
Well, it's different than what we have today, but if you put it new house on a sewer system, you're still gonna pay $40 a
I
month
agree.
for the rest of your life to have that sewer
so what
system.
you're
So this is
getting-
just making those two systems
What
more
you're getting from that, though, is you don't have
Let-
to worry about it.
Let's,
You flush
let's
it to
let
one and it
Mr.
goes away.
Frick finish up here. Can I ask you, about the PFA?
Yes,
How
sir.
did you determine, I mean, this may be a silly question, but how did you decide that the PFA, where the boundary were? What science did you use to, I mean, a lot of that's below the Wakulla Springs. Water doesn't run north. Help me understand why the PFA
Actually, it does.
actually does run
actually
north.
does. Is that what we're seeing?
Yes, sir. So the reason, as you probably are aware of, we have a Wakulla Springs BMAP that was in place, that we put in, when was that, 2013? 2015. So in 2015, and as part of that, we identified 2 priority focus areas, and part of that discussion was exactly what you're talking about, Commissioner, was that southern area. Let me go back to that slide on here, that PFA number 2. There was a lot of information that said that was contributing, that there was water getting up to there. There were some people that were asking whether that was really happening or not. So I think, that's why we divided it into those. Really, now we can just say it's all the priority focus area. There's not really a 1 or 2. We know that those areas are contributing to the spring.
How did you determine that? Yeah, I'm just curious how the science worked. How did you determine that second area, that number 2,
High studies,
contributed to that?
So I don't know, Moito, how
does.
many of the Water Management District and GS studies, I don't know, Carlos, if you...
We also did groundwater level maps that showed the level of the groundwater system, and showed it flowing north and south.
That's interesting.
Spring Creek, yeah. I think tide itself has something to do with pushing it.
It's also
The only thing that bothers me, I know you're not through yet, but the one element that bothers me is that you said you had 2 years to do this. I mean, it's sort of like a knee-jerk reaction. I'm not, no disrespect to you guys. Y'all did what you were told to do, but it seemed like if we had more time to study, is this really the fix? I'm like, these guys are talking, I'm not sure this is really the fix, and maybe we change it later down the road, but I just hate to see us have to put this much burden on the taxpayer that can't afford it probably, to abandon a working septic tank that probably really works better than one of these performance-based. It
Right.
may or may not.
No, I certainly understand that.
That's the issue where we're at as commissioners, with trying to
Right.
tell our citizens, hey, this is going to be put on you, and there's nothing we can do about it. So it just looks like a knee-jerk reaction to me, the government, big government saying you got to do this, mandating it, and then you guys saying this is what you're going to do.
Right. So to that point, I would say we started on Wakulla Springs a number of years ago. I think we started our BMAP back, 2013. So we'd already established the restoration goal prior to the Springs and Aquifer Protection Act. We were already engaging Wakulla County and stakeholders about how to restore this system. We were already engaged on various sources. And so, we've had a number of years to look at this. I think the largest source right now that's, affecting the spring systems are the septic systems that are around those springs.
Well, and also Commissioner, DEP, Mr. Frick, and the Water Management District, they've worked with us, as you know, and we've got, a large amount of funding to date, over $11 million and more coming to help fix this, to start working towards fixing this. And this is, you know, this is kind of the best that we've got right now. We got to get started somewhere. And, but they've been really gracious and really helped us, and we've worked well together. So we're fixing the problem. It's just you can't do it overnight. It's impossible.
Mr. David,
You don't
I
have
have a
enough-
question. Of the septic tanks we have, we're running sewer up Spring Creek Highway. What percentage of the septic tanks that we currently have will the new sewer system pull off? What percentage would you say? If you got 12,000 tanks, will it pull 6,000 off?
The current project we got right now will probably pull, ultimately, once we get everything done, in that particular area, be upwards of 2,000 homes.
And that would be based on the percentage.
Potential,
Yeah,
because there's not 2,000 homes
right,
there.
but between Magnolia Gardens, Wakulla Gardens, and the
It's
next
2,000 what?
phases.
No, I think it's houses.
There are 2,000 houses in Wakulla Gardens?
About 2,000 houses, yeah.
And that would be, generally speaking, 50% of our septic tanks in the area? It'd be,
In that
it probably would
area?
be.
Yeah, 100% in Wakulla
Was
Gardens.
100% there.
Wakulla Garden,
But
Magnolia
in
Garden.
that quadrant that falls within this,
Right.
that would be probably 75% of the septic tanks.
Yeah.
I think if
That's, no, I don't think you can get there.
I'd say more 10%, 15
About
maybe.
10%. There's still a lot of work to be done. There's a whole lot.
I got a good idea for you guys, back on your PFA. They need to buy some spray field property out of the PFA, right?
We're working on that with them right now.
Actually, Otter Creek
We've got
wastewater plant
a great place for it, and we're working with them.
is
on
not in the PFA, so we're money ahead. But the golf course is, where we're gonna do
We're
reuse.
good, we're good there.
yes, sir, we've talked about it.
Good idea.
Yeah, we talked about that already.
Good.
But that is my presentation. I'm happy to answer more questions.
What, the size of Wakulla Springs in relation to the other 30 springs, what relationship is that? How big are we, the number one spring of the 30, or?
Number
volume-
one in what regards?
Volume-wise, volume of the spring,
Oh, discharge volume?
yes.
Oh, yeah, Wakulla is the largest. Right?
Noted as world's
Yeah,
largest spring.
I was gonna say, it's one of the world's largest springs. It's the largest
The largest
discharge.
single spring, I think, is
Correct.
what it is. It's
Right.
not, there's some complexes that put out a lot more water, like Rainbow Springs,
I gotta
a
look
lot
at,
more water.
I was gonna say, I gotta look at what Rainbow would put out.
Yes.
I mean, that's, what, 7 or 8, different main springs in that area. But, I mean, as far as largest discharge from event, yes.
So you have 5 years to implement the remediation part, right?
We have, correct, yes, sir. We have 5 years to put that together. That's why we need to work with you all to get that, that feasibility information to put into the remediation
So
plan.
theoretically, it could be 5 years before someone needing a repair would have to upgrade, correct?
Correct, yes, sir.
Now, the other part, was it the Florida home builders that sued to get it put off 6 months, right?
Yes, sir. So we had multiple challenges to our BMAPs. The home builders asked for an extension of time. They didn't challenge the BMAPs. They asked for an extension of time to decide whether they want to challenge it for all 13 BMAPs, and that was 6 months. And basically, where that is we had 15 different entities that either asked for an extension of time or challenged various BMAPs. All 15 of those were giving until the first week in January, so that's 16 months to decide whether they want to challenge the BMAPs or not.
And
So-
Roger, I'm the one that called you about trying to get our comp plan to match your,
Yes, and you talked to Beth?
I think so, yes. And, but my point is, because this is gonna come up later, is that, not tonight, you're okay.
All right.
The,
I appreciate that.
My whole reasoning for following the BMAP rule, because you know the county rule is more stringent than yours now. It's 5 acres or
Like
less.
5 acres.
The northern priority focus area. We don't have anything in the southern.
Right.
So, and my position was that we should just follow what you're doing. You guys put science into it to figure out what the lot size needed to be. Is that correct, or did you just take a wild guess?
The
1 acre.
Well, the 1 acre is on the new construction. That's the prohibition in the law. On the remediation, we're actually saying all sizes
I understand.
are
That's over
required.
20 years theoretically, but I'm saying,
Right.
on the new construction, the 1 acre lot size, did y'all just guess that, or did somebody
That was, we had done some calculations back, this was actually back 8 or 9 years ago, and that was just carried over and put into the law.
Gene and I had a
So,
long talk about this the other day.
but,
So, as I understand it, we have 140,000 pounds of nitrogen we have to take out of the system. Currently, if we take all the septic tanks on, we'll call it, on the priority focus areas, we get to, if we take it to sewer, we get there. If we don't take it to sewer, if we take it only to OSTDS, we still only get about halfway there.
I thought it was like 9, what's the number? Sorry,
We get
Commissioner.
6 pounds credit per every standard septic tank we convert
Per year?
per year.
What's the milligrams per liter discharge in a normal septic effluent? Anybody know that?
It varies, but it's somewhere between, if it's
10
between
pounds
about 30 and 60,
30 milligrams per liter?
and 60 milligrams per liter. That's a
Milligrams per liter
conventional.
times MGD is pounds per day.
They estimate it was 9 to 10 pounds per day, per year.
Calculate it right now. I'm gonna calculate it right here.
Okay, get your calculator out. I'm just using their numbers and what they're calculating.
Divided by a million.
So we did that calculation, Commissioner, so if we enhance all of the systems, we'd basically get 77,000 pounds.
77,000, about halfway there.
You're
Okay.
talking every system in the
Every system
PFA,
in
not
Every system, yes, sir.
not specific to Wakulla
So,
County.
so assume we put a lot more systems on that in that PFA. That means we have to take a lot more out? Or a lot more sewer, or a lot more OSTDSs in the future? And
You would-
when does the money you're gonna give us to that $10,000 run out? And does that apply to new systems we put in the future in lots larger than 1 acre?
So the $10,000 applies to remediation only. So that is not for a new system that gets put into the ground.
So any new system put in the ground, they won't be able to take advantage of that $10,000. So
That's correct.
When we have to take those and put them in a high-performance system, they'll have to pay the whole amount.
If there's fund, yes.
Okay, since we couldn't answer my percentage question, I'll ask you that question another way.
Sure.
How many septic tanks do we have in the BMAP area?
Well, that was the question I had asked Ms. Homan, and we don't have that, but I will get that to you. I think-
7,904.
Mr. Hess said it was about, about six, half of it.
So in Wakulla County, there are about 6,600.
About,
Just check right now, so just in the priority focus area in Wakulla County, there are.
about 6,000, you say?
Yeah.
So we're running 30% at some point in time?
Oh,
At some point in time?
one time, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's good to know.
That's gonna be a couple of years, quite a few years.
Government's
But
close.
the good news is about that, is as we're sewering, the more we can sewer, the better, because that completely takes it out. It doesn't put any more back in. So that's the good news.
The sewering will solve the thing, but there's a lot of places we can't sewer.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
No doubt about
and
it.
especially some of these larger parcels, okay, are areas that are a long ways away, and so we've got OSTDS, high performance septic tanks are going to be important in those areas, and
But the more we sewer, the better this thing gets immediately. That is the fix for it.
Mr. Frick, did we know by science that these high-performing septic tanks really work? Do they really work?
Yes, sir. So we have installed a few of those.
As long as they're plugged
Department
in?
of- Well, yes, if they're operated, but even the passive systems, we've installed a few of those. DEP has. We've had one in place at Itchtuckney Springs for about 4 years now, and we have a couple other down in Central Florida in those areas, and we see quite a bit of a reduction from those systems. We also know that that if those systems that need a operating permit, those performance-based systems, we know those work. But obviously they need to be operated and plugged in, so.
And there lies part of the problem for folks in the woods here are gonna work around that, and I mean, that's unfortunate, but that's just the fact of life. I'm back to what Randy's point was earlier, is do we have a standard? Is there some sort of industry standard for people to build
Passive
these
system.
passive systems?
Massive drain fields.
Yeah.
Yeah, the drain field. So our standard that we've identified is what's known as the NSF 245 standard, which basically says that there, just from the tank alone, has to be about a 50% or better reduction out of that system. And then you add the drain field, which you get, generally we've seen somewhere between a 20 and 30% reduction on that side. So what we've said is we need 65% better than, you know, what a conventional system would do.
So who decides how to build it like that? Is that an engineer, or is that, I mean, who?
Yeah, those are all in the Department of Health rules. So if the system's already designed, they get that NSF 245 standard. They get a stamp, and you can install those systems.
That's what we do now.
So they'll be they'll be certified.
That's what we do right now.
Because I hear people on the radio already advertising this. This has already hit the airwaves, and people are, these plumbers, I hear them advertising, we can put these new septic tanks in for you. I want to make sure that people are getting what they're paying for.
Performance-based, it's got to be done by an engineer, period.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, there's a couple of systems that are deemed to comply, like a HOOT or a FAST, and those have been tested.
Yep.
I question.
You just mentioned that.
They're certified, though, whether you agree with the
certified.
results or not.
Yes, they're certified, and that's what we have. Basically, they're saying, not you, but you know what I mean. Our rule right now is more stringent than the BMAP. Okay, if you have less than 5 acres, you got to have a performance-based system.
If you have less than 5 or less than 1?
No, it's less than 5.
That's local rule, not state rule.
Oh.
Theirs is less stringent, actually,
Yeah.
but it covers a much larger area, much more developable area. I wouldn't say larger area. We don't care about national forests. Nobody's going to build out there. But what any one takeaway I'd like you to take is, no, there is no standard how to build this passive drain field. I can't find it.
That's my point.
Yes, there is no standard. That was the real kicker to me. These repairs and these other stuffs will be a whole lot less painful if you just built the drain field a different way. And my understanding is you, I guess, mix a carbon source, which would be wood chips, with the sand.
Yes, sir.
And you got to excavate the drain field out, and you got to mix it correctly, which my idea was a concrete mixer. For that might be a good business for somebody. But anyway, they'd go in, put this bed down, and you build your drain field on top of it. And then that's it.
But you'd have to refresh that after a certain number of years,
Wood
right?
chips, wood chips aren't gone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's anaerobic. There's no air.
Right, so we've had a system that's been in place, like I said, 4 or 5 years now. We're not seeing very much subsidence on that system at all.
You mentioned there's reduction in both the tank and the drain field. When you're talking about reduction in the tank, that's with a performance-based system, I suppose.
No.
It could be with a passive system.
How does a tank reduce nitrogen itself? I know that may be a simple question.
Anaerobic.
Right, you can use,
That's why I call it a septic tank. It's septic conditions, no oxygen, right?
correct, yes, sir.
Randy, help me understand. I'm still not clear in my mind. What's going to protect all these people out here who just go and somebody just comes in and says this is going to work? I'm going to sell you this
It's
for
got to be
$5,000.
permitted through the Department of Health. They can't just.
They can't.
You
And it's got to be engineered.
To get a permit for a performance-based system,
Okay.
you got to have an engineered
Okay.
thing.
And they have to be inspected, yes,
I
sir.
do most of them, so I've done.
So your system is happy with a 1 acre. Anything below 1 acre has to go on a septic tank or has to go on performance-based.
That's what the
Nitrogen reducing, not
Nitrogen
nitrogen reducing, that's what the prohibition in the law was.
And we're at 5 acres.
We're at 5. Only in the North PFA.
Oh, okay.
Now the state is adding the other South PFA. In my mind, and Eugene and I talked about this, he doesn't agree with me, but that's okay, I still like him. The trade-off between the two, you're going to gain a lot more septic tanks not being built because you're greatly enlarging the area than you are by reducing the lot size. That's what I think.
I would just ask a question, why are we at 5 and they're at 1?
Well, that's what Randy.
Well, we,
Pulled it out of the air. That's why we're at 5. We literally pulled it out of the air.
back when we were having problems with the spray field from Tallahassee polluting our spring, we stepped up and, as a community, put forth this to reduce our inflow into the aquifer. Now we're, as we move forward, we've got this situation where we've got to, if we want to clean up Wakulla Springs, we've got to get 140,000 pounds out. And every standard septic tank that goes in
The basin.
into this priority focus area,
140,000 pounds in the basin.
140,000 pounds in the basin, but most of this is going to come out of the priority focus area, because that's where you can get it.
Well, that's the only place you're regulating anyway, so.
Let's be sure we're on the same page. I'm not
The
disagreeing,
attenuation-
but the basin goes all the way to Georgia. Is that what you're saying?
Right, but the attenuation of the rates on the ones that are outside of the priority focus area means that very little of that
I got you.
nitrogen gets into the system. So you can spend a fortune changing the ones outside of the priority focus area and not really accomplish anything.
I got you.
And so if you're going to spend your money, the only place to spend the money to do this is in the priority focus area, because that's where most of the nitrogen's coming from. That happens to be a lot of Wakulla County. And what we really have to be careful about is putting more standard septic tanks inside the priority focus area than we absolutely have to accommodate growth. You know, we have to come up with some other way to do it. This is their first attempt, but as you read it, if it doesn't meet the criteria that they've put forward, they'll make the restrictions more stringent. And so
You'll measure that every year or so.
they'll measure that, and they'll
Yes,
be in a
sir.
5-year increment, and we've got to get 30% out in the next 5 years. So where's this, you got 20 years to do this, and we've got to get 140,000 pounds out. And if we change every septic tank, okay, to high-performance septic tanks in the priority focus area, we still don't get there. And that's why we can't afford to put any more in than we have to.
We're not voting on something tonight, are we? I missed something? Okay.
The long-term average has been dropping over the last 5 years, well, 6 years, since about 2012. So we started up about 0.9, and now we're down to about 0.4. So I think the latest is it's hovering around that, about 0.4. So most of that has been the spray field and City of Tallahassee upgrades and moving that, which was significant. We've seen a similar drop in concentrations in actually that tunnel that's coming from that area where the spray field was right on top of it. So we've seen about that same reduction. So that's where we're at, about 0.4.
One more question for you, if I may. The $10,000 per homeowner, is that going to be limited to income? Will there be a cutoff? No, that'd be to everybody.
No, sir. It's only limited geographically to the priority focus areas.
Good.
County
We're
attorney.
thankful for that.
County attorney.
I have a quick question. On this septic incentive program, does that $10,000 grant apply for somebody with an existing septic who is willing to hook up to central sewer?
No, ma'am. It's only for upgrade of the septic system to an advanced septic system.
So we're disincentivizing an actual more effective solution by not allowing them to use it for central sewer.
No, ma'am. What I would say is that we've been assisting the county in those areas where sewering's going in to pay for that difference for the homeowners.
No,
so
sure.
those projects are still out there. That's a different pot of money.
Make him mad, Heather.
No, I'm just saying that if that money could be available, there might be neighborhoods that would come forward who would say, listen, if we could apply this, you can do special assessments and use the $10,000 to pay that off. We could get more sewer out there.
We have dollars for that. So if there's a community, a neighborhood that wants to do that, we would be happy to do that. The Springs money that's out there, the $50 million a year, and the projects going through that, that's how we've been funding those types of retrofits. So there is money available for that.
Generally speaking,
We've been looking at doing a little bit of stuff. We're going to be approaching y'all about mysterious waters, getting that subdivision, doing the same thing we're doing at
River
Buffalo
Plantation
Spring,
has a
River-
spray field right on the
Yeah, we
Wakulla
want to go and
Right.
get those. Those are obvious ones that need to get on central sewer.
And I say, I'm happy, bring them on.
Yeah, that's part of
We're
our
ready, yeah.
overall big plan. So yeah.
Excellent.
if
I like it.
if there's 3 different types of acceptable septic tanks, and let's say that performance base happens to be the top level, could the county say basically that we will accept the last 2 and we're going to just say that the performance base, because I think people will put that performance base in not understanding so much of the particulars about maintenance of it and the cost of ongoing of it. If I could waive my one, I'd say we'll just eliminate that and go with 2 systems that, let's say, you approve.
There's more than 3 systems,
Well, same
different
difference.
types of ways. from the department's point of view, we want the load reduction. So however you get there, whichever one of those 3 avenues you go at, you know, we're fine with
But
that.
A lot more
You're
than
asking
3.
if we can
So-
exclude one of the systems, like if
Yeah.
we said, okay, we've got passive options that you can do, but you can't do a performance-based in Wakulla County. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's what he's asking, is do we have the authority to
That's what I'm
pick
saying.
and choose the type of systems
Well,
that
he
we allow?
said, he has said that the other, there's several systems that work.
That's part of the help.
So,
If you have a,
Yeah.
if you have a high groundwater situation, or if you have a mound system, maybe the performance-based, I mean, you can't do a passive drain field, I don't think with a mound system. I don't know that.
You
The
could do
mount-
it with a mounted system. It
I would
would
think-
increase.
Some situations,
Size, yeah.
high groundwater where you couldn't excavate or rock or something like that, so I wouldn't exclude any option.
Do the mound systems fall inside the, because most mound systems are in confined soils, and that's why you have to use a mound system.
No, high
And that-
groundwater. Your high groundwater, 72 inches, you gotta have 72 inches separation.
Yeah, but that's where
Unsuitable soils.
that's where the
48
Lime rock
inches,
and
but-
pipe clays, we usually.
Yeah,
work
but it's not completely contained. You might have a little bit of pipe clay that generates requires
I
a
just
mound
did one
system,
where
but
they
it's
had-
still not completely
They had-
contained.
They had rock at the ground surface.
Yeah.
And they got a 3.5-foot mound. The whole treatment is in the mound. So if you got rock at the ground surface, like in Wakulla Station, you're gonna have a big mound.
Yeah. As the commissioner said before, there's certainly areas in the state and here in Wakulla County where those passive systems, the in the ground, may not be viable.
Because you gotta over excavate it, and if you start digging up lime rock, it's gonna get very expensive.
And, you know, I presented, 3 weeks ago now, 2 weeks ago, at the septic tank installers. And last week I was with the home builders, talking with them about the various, you know, approaches to go. I think a lot of the septic installers are looking at what is the cheapest way to, you know, and that's the system that they're going to propose.
that was my question. I want to see us go with the least expensive system that is acceptable to your system.
We've gotten the fast system down to about $4,000 installed. I don't think anybody in the state's got them that cheap.
Wow.
That's cheap. And so, you know, that's through, I helped LB redesign the tank, and he poured a new mold for it. Other than that, it's just a standard system. So.
And
if
that's
we knew how to-
performance-based?
Yeah. If we knew, but you still gotta have the maintenance contract. If
Right.
we knew how to do the drain fields, somebody could start putting their head to it and figuring out how to do it cheaper. But we just don't know how to even do it.
Right, that's
We
my
don't
point.
know the standard, you know, how thick, you know, like my idea about mixing the.
Well, they have the specifications, how thick those layers need to be, but you're correct.
Tell me
How
where
to
they're at.
engineer and how to do that specifically, I can get you the reference, but that's the new DOH rule. But as you've talked with Ms. Groover, Roxanne, how that's going to be, because I know we just talked about last week, if you mix it, you know, back at headquarters and you drive it out, you know, to the site, depending on how far it is, it separates.
She said the big
And so you have to
problem with
remix
them
it.
was- She said, don't do it in situ, they spread wood chips, and they took a mixer, and she said.
Yeah,
"They
you
don't
can't,
mix."
right.
That's when I thought, why not put it in a concrete truck like LB, and you could mix it the whole way you're there, and then you have a way to.
Sounds like a new business.
Yeah, exactly. Then you have a way for distribute it out with the concrete truck, and you get it nice and even. LB would be all over it.
Right. And I know a lot of the installers are really working hard.
I got it.
I was going to
I
say,
feel it.
Moita and I are going to open up shop next week here.
Are
so,
the
at least
DOH
a month from
rules
now. Yes, sir.
adopted already?
They are, yes, sir, as of July
They're
31st.
not,
Wow.
they're not being enforced right now. They have a 6-month time period, right?
Well, that's the sort of the
that's the
mandate
BMAP
for the new
adoption.
systems,
Okay.
so that's 6 months from now.
But the-
However, but the rule to use the in-ground nitrogen reducing systems, that is in effect today.
But you
Well,
can
you're
go
ten-
get a regular septic tank permit tomorrow,
And your $10,000
incentive.
incentive is enforced today, or will be shortly?
Next month.
It'll be available next month.
And
As soon
that
as
will
we go
work-
to the Legislative Budget Commission and they
That'll work on,
authorize us.
we can use that on a passive system.
Yes, sir.
For your information,
That's the hard part.
Randy is our resident engineer.
Not a
Sounds like
resident engineer.
Mr.
I've had a
Frick,
lot of jobs during this.
Mr. Frick, did
Yeah.
you ever think you'd be the number one man in the number two business?
Mike Stewart used to
Yeah.
write himself all the time, I remember.
We appreciate you
Over the
guys.
last few years, it
I
certainly
appreciate you
felt
guys
that way.
working with us to help us with our sewer projects. That's been a big shot in the arm for us here to get us off the
Good.
septic tank.
Well, those are very good projects, and we'd really love to work with the county to incentivize those as well. As the commissioner mentioned, it's not going to be the answer in every place, but where it's most cost effective, certainly we want to be able to assist you all to get those in place.
If there's any way, you've got 5 years to implement these repairs, that's where I see the biggest problem.
Yes, sir.
Is, you know, when you go, whoever they are, is this, now the upgrade, is that in the whole county or just in the PFA?
Just in the PFA, the $10,000 just for the PFA.
Regardless of acreage, though.
So, but you have someone
Correct.
on low income and their drain field is failing and, you know, septic guy comes, so I can fix it for $800, you know, we'll put a couple new chambers in, you're good to go, or you're gonna spend $12,000 to upgrade your system. And then they're not allowed to fix it anymore, you're gonna have to spend 12 grand, even with the incentive, they're not gonna do it.
Right.
They'll fix
Right.
it on the weekends or
That's
you
exactly
know?
right. Unfortunately.
We
Yeah.
can't fix that, though.
No, I know, but that's the
Yep.
problem. If you notice, I don't know if you knew this or not, when we first adopted this rule, performance-based, we said every septic tank, Mike, you remember, in the county had to be it.
Yeah.
Before we dropped back to 5 acres, repair permits went down to almost zero. So all of a sudden, everybody's system started working fine.
Right, I've heard,
But
yes, sir.
Nobody needed to repair.
Amazing how those went away, yeah.
Everything was great. But as soon as we changed the rule, where you could do repairs and modifications, people started getting repair permits again. And I think it was better for the environment to have a properly functioning septic system than one that's just discharging raw sewer.
Yes, sir.
So how does the TMDL compare for the Wakulla River and the Wassissa River?
The target on Wassissa is the same, right?
I think it might be,
This is gonna be in the
I
newspaper.
think it's a little bit lower in Wassissa.
Yeah, I don't recall it specifically exactly what the Wassissa was.
And how does their nitrogen output compare to ours now? Because, I mean, they're fairly close to us, but they don't have the same, you know, density of people north like we do in Wakulla.
Correct. So Wassissa is one of the ones similar to all the springs along the Swanee and Santa Fe River, where the primary, is agriculture. It's, fertilizer and livestock and things like that, waste, that's contributing to those systems. So the remediation is a little bit different, what the focus is, but we can get you that information and do the comparison.
And in both of those PFAs, the agricultural contribution, is that Georgia, or is that, Leon County and northern Jefferson County, or is it Georgia where we're not going to have any control over?
No, those are Florida.
Okay.
What about the agriculture component? What are restrictions on agriculture? Let's say I've got a farm and I want to do heavy beef cattle.
Right. So as soon as the BMAP is in place, well, actually the BMAP's already in place, the one there. But the way the state law is set up is agriculture, when we have a BMAP, is required to do best management practices.
Okay.
So that is a requirement. You can, I say a requirement, there is an option. You could monitor and say you're not contributing, but
Yeah.
it's very hard to say you're not contributing
Had to
nitrogen.
prove it.
Yeah.
Monitor.
So really it's doing those best management practices and working with the Department of Ag and Consumer Services.
I have a question there, because in best management practices on cattle farming, it's a 35-foot buffer from wetlands and 35-foot from karst. And that's all the protection. And does the waste from cows come out in 35 feet before it enters a karst window?
So there's lots of studies on how much, and most of it's on riverine, but basically getting to a water body, about a 30-foot buffer is sufficient to be able to reduce nutrients that are getting through that to the water body itself. And they've done a lot of studies on stream systems, and we've looked at it as far as looking with BMPs, specifically silviculture BMPs. The department did, working with DACs.
Well, silviculture, I could see it, but with cattle operations, the amount of poop that would fall, within that basin of that 30 of a karst window could really up the amount of nitrogen going into the aquifer.
Yeah, so with the surface water part, with those karst windows, it's really how much is attenuating as it's going through that buffer, as it's going through the vegetation. Where we see when you're looking at, so there's that surface water component, and the 30-foot buffer is certainly is viable for that to reduce the nutrients. Now, in the spring systems, we're looking at what's getting down through the soils and through, down to the aquifer. So that's a little bit different of a attenuation. And so I think if the concern is how much is running off from rain events going through, 30-foot is a good buffer. How much is actually going down into the aquifer, it's going to depend on the soil conditions. It's going to depend on whether there's some sort of clay layer or some sort of layer that's impeding the water getting down there. And we have some data on that where it shows what the reduction, what that attenuation is. And I can't remember exactly what the attenuation factor for that we used.
So
Do you remember what the attenuation factor
I'm
was?
looking for the specific attenuation factor, but we know that for livestock waste BMPs, that they're expected to get a reduction of about 10%, and that's the loading to the groundwater. So those BMPs, as they're in place, there's a reduction of 10% going into groundwater. I'm looking for the attenuation.
How many cattle operations do we have around active karst windows?
Well, we had one developed just a couple of years ago, and they only put a small
Owens?
35-foot,
Bellamy?
Bellamy, yeah. They only put a really small,
I don't know if that was a karst window, like a low spot.
that's what they said, but it's kept water in it for the last 4 years, so, yeah, so it's gotta be a window to the karst. So,
What do I know?
and he has one on the other side of the property.
I thought that thing was dry.
Good. Let's take some questions from citizens.
Yeah, we got a whole hour to burn.
Thank you.
Anyone?
Thank you.
Eugene, come on up, if you will.
Eugene's got some
Introduce yourself, and then afterwards, please fill out a speaker card.
Eugene Watkins, Crawfordville. First, I'd like to say we're doing a great job here, adding sewer to the different communities. And the question I had, I think, is going to cover a little bit about what Randy and I talked about. And it's a question for Tom. Is that right? Yeah. Is in the study, did you guys take into account future growth? Like, we're eliminating, what is it, 2,000-3,000 homes or more from the septic tanks. But have you looked at how many more homes are we putting on septic tanks? And I think, Randy, we talked about if we reduce it to 1 home per acre, if we're going to be putting more homes on septic tank, are we actually going to be getting ahead of the curve, or are we just going to be adding more homes at the same rate that we're eliminating septic tanks? If we're putting, allowing, who knows, over the next 10 years, if we're going to build another couple thousand houses, maybe more, are we getting ahead of that curve? If we go, did you guys study that in your?
And if you don't mind, come back up so we can capture that, your answer.
Let me add to his question. Is there a certain acreage figure where you're deemed to attenuate the nitrogen output of the septic tank? In other words, if you have 40 acres with 1 septic tank, I mean, doesn't the natural biological action of the soil take care of a lot of the nitrogen on its own?
Well, remember, we're going down,
Right.
Not out on those. But so the number for the 1 acre that I'd mentioned for those was basically looking at what's going down and looking at the groundwater standard, which is 10 milligrams per liter, so much higher than the 0.35 of what we're looking at. So that's how that was identified. And the future growth question is, so that prohibition in the law, that's the future growth component that we have, which says that you can't put a conventional septic tank on a lot of less than 1 acre. So that is the prohibition that's right now in the law. Now, there is a difference, and nobody mentioned this, so I kick myself for bringing this up. But if you look at, there is a difference right now, currently, between new growth, which is less than 1 acre, and what we've said that needs to be remediated in the PFA. Because if you remember, I said everything.
That's right.
And so there is that difference, and there's some differences in not only what's stated right now currently in the law, of what, you know, what we have to comply with, but also what Department of Health has in their rules. So over the next few years, that certainly has to be worked out, and that will be a you know, something that we will be working with stakeholders and looking at. So we're still collecting that
I thought
information.
of, you know, it says in 20 years, you're supposed to have all of them switched over to nitrogen reducing, right? The BMAP says. Theoretically, you could go in on year 19 and pull a permit for a regular septic tank, right? And then theoretically, within a year, it's supposed to be converted over to
Yeah, but
performance-based.
the ones that are put in after enacting the Basin Management Action Plan are not available. The $10,000 conversion is not available.
Not for new ones.
Not for new.
Well, that's as
I'm
soon.
saying, if you have
correct.
5 acres, I could put one
I'm
in at
just
year
saying
15.
is yes, but if we change the rules and all of a sudden next year you can do it, those houses won't be available to get the $10,000 credit. Okay, so when the change has to occur, the cost of that's going to fall onto the homeowner. So, you know,
So when you did this count, I don't want to beat this to death, but you took a certain area that acres 43,000, whatever, 500 square feet. So you said, here's the, you know, 30 milligrams per liter of the nitrogen it's putting out. Here's the area it's putting it over. It's not going to kick it over a certain level.
No, what we calculated what the load was to groundwater. So from each septic system,
Yeah, but if you
looking
put
at
one
that
septic
load to
system
ground.
on 50 acres obviously contributes less because it's a much bigger
Well,
area of water underneath it. I guess.
That septic system would contribute the same amount, you know, plus or minus, depending if they're very clustered together and it, you know, basically oversaturated the soils. That's a little
Much less
different.
amount per acre, though, obviously.
Correct, if you look in the aggregate. So that is correct. So the question is if you have that one system on 40 acres versus if you have it on half an acre.
I guess Eugene's point was...
But the load to the groundwater, sorry to cut you off, Commissioner, that load to the groundwater is the same of what's getting down to the groundwater. You would just have, when you look at it across the 40 acres, you only have one system, you know, in the case of one system on 40 acres. In the other case, you're going to have, you know, 40 times 2, 80 systems.
I guess Eugene's point would be if you have 40 acres and then they come in and rezone it to 2-acre lots, now they're going to put 20 systems on there. And was that taken into account? I mean, is the...
80 systems on
Whatever. No, 1 per 2 acres.
that. Well, you had 40 acres, okay.
Yeah, right.
Well,
Perhaps made a mistake.
what's gonna happen is we're trying to think, and that's good. But what will happen from a market standpoint here? Market will help fix this problem. Reason being is as our county continues to grow, we've got how many now? We don't have few large tracts of land. The price of that and the more pressure we get for people coming down here, the more density, the higher the price that land's going to go up. And that's going to, if a developer comes in, they're going to say, I got to dense it up to get it to where I can afford to build a house for the average person. So that's going to automatically kick them in a sewer, a gravity sewer. So it's going to eventually take care of itself. As this county grows more and more, the price of land is going to continue, larger tracts is going to go up, and therefore when a developer comes in, they're going to have to increase density, and that's going to bring sewer, so you're eliminating that problem. So it's probably going to balance itself out over time. Well, no, I doubt that because the land price is going to get so high.
But you did answer Eugene's question that the future growth has been taken into account with the 1 acre limitation
With the prohibition, yes, sir.
and probably excluding any rezoning and cutting up because you'd have no way of knowing how much that's
Correct. So that's what I was going to say, Commissioner, is exactly that. You know, what would we base that on? We don't know what that future is going to look like. However, we're going to be monitoring every year. We have 5-year check-ins, so we do have that ability to adaptively manage as it moves on.
So you can come back a year from now and say, all right, instead of 1 acre, we want to make it, if you're on less than 2 acres. If it's not working, you could come back and...
You'll ratchet it up.
We would be looking at how the system is responding, and at some point would need to make a decision. And that's part of the reason why in our BMAP, if you look at, we were aggressive. We wanted to get 80% of the reductions by year 10, so we would know a significant amount of whether the system was responding or not. And then if it's not, then we know we need to change. We still have 10 years to make those changes. If it's responding, then we know we're doing the right thing.
Really aren't that many septic tanks. Most of our new construction around here is in subdivisions that are on sewers.
Yeah, well,
There's not many.
How much
Still gonna
did
be a lot of
the,
people trying to build houses on.
how much did the Tallahassee spray field take out when they put that online? How much did that change the,
So like I said, it dropped at about 50%.
that's a lot.
Yes, sir.
Any other citizens like to ask a question or make a comment?
Big thing for me is the passive drain field. How do you do it?
Mr. Stevenson?
That'll save a lot of grief. Y'all do work with the Department of Health closely, right? On
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And if you will, sir, just fill out a speaker card whenever you're done.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Jim Stevenson with the Florida Springs Institute and the Wakulla Springs Alliance. Retired FSU professor Dr. Bob Dial is a volunteer tour boat operator at Wakulla Springs 1 day a week. Conducting his own informal survey during the past 2.5 years, he's found that his passengers have come from as many as 56 countries. 56 countries to Wakulla Springs.
I rode the boat on Saturday with a bunch of my family, about 10 of us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Wakulla Springs is an international tourist destination. That's the good news. Who remembers that 8 major movies were filmed in the crystal clear waters of Wakulla Springs? Surely you remember the glass bottom boat tours. You remember the abundant birds and other wildlife seen during the riverboat tours. These are fond but distant memories. I lead tours of the Wakulla Springs Basin that begin at Cascades Park in Tallahassee and end on the tower at the spring. I commonly ask the group to count the birds that they can see from the tower. During my last tour, which was 2 weeks ago, not one bird was seen. Now, you folks have known Wakulla Springs for a very long time, and you may find that surprising. In 1994, this board was the first in the state to create a spring protection ordinance for your spring. Also, your county was the first in the state to require the nitrate reducing septic tanks. We trust that the county won't retreat from your past accomplishments to protect Wakulla Springs. Yes, the advanced septic systems are more expensive, but the trade-offs are clean drinking water, safe oysters, a spring in which to swim, and revenue from over 200,000 park visitors a year. Wakulla Springs, the largest spring in the United States, a very special place to the people of Wakulla County. It is the goose that lays the golden egg, but the goose is very sick, poisoned by nitrate from septic tanks and fertilizer. If one were to weaken the septic tank regulations by any means, you risk killing the goose. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Come on up.
My name is Robert Thompson. I'll fill out a speaker card after I finish.
Thank you, sir.
I'm a biologist and a retired park ranger at Wakulla Springs. I just would like to provide maybe an additional context for the BMAP. Thank you, Tom, for the great presentation. He related that the ultimate goal of BMAP is to meet the total maximum daily load for nitrogen of 0.35. And I 100%, maybe 200% support that goal. But the ultimate goal, and this is the context, is to restore the biological plant and animal communities, to restore the health of Wakulla Springs. I mean, you can talk a number really doesn't have a lot of meaning, but the health of the Wakulla Springs is what this is all about. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Again, thank you guys for all coming down and talking to us, and we certainly appreciate it. And thank you for all the assistance in Water Management District. We certainly appreciate that as well. Thank you.
The easier, you got 5 years to implement this thing about repairs and maintenance, so every way you can help out people to ease into it. I know you gotta do it, but.
That's the key.
Thank you, Tom.
Further comments from the board?
I'm concerned that everybody recognizes that, you know, as we move forward, if we're not making the goals, the requirements will get stricter and stricter.
Got to start somewhere and measure.
All of Wakulla Springs.
Yep. Very good.
Support the Springs.
So a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We stand adjourned. Thank you all for coming out today.
Richard Harden, I support the Springs. Support everything, didn't I?
You did.